Hi there, Jeff here from the Wetsuit Centre, talking to you today about swimming wetsuits versus multi-purpose wetsuits. So what's the difference between the two? If you're looking about for a new wetsuit, say for swimming or for surfing, you might be wondering what is the difference between a swimming wetsuit and a multi-purpose wetsuit, and will you be able to use a multi-purpose wetsuit, say for swimming as well as surfing, that kind of thing. So the differences really come down to the type of neoprene that they're using, amongst a few other technical differences. And essentially it comes down to whether it is single-lined neoprene or double-lined neoprene. So you might have come into that terminology before. But what is single-lined, what is double-lined, and the pros and cons of each. Okay, so single-lined neoprene they tend to use in something like this, which is a swimming or swim-specific wetsuit, okay? You will notice that this particular material is very smooth, a bit more shiny, and that is the single-lined neoprene, okay? What that means is the neoprene itself is only lined on the inside, okay? And when I say lined, it means that it's lined with a lycra material, a lycra jersey over the top of the rubber itself. They use that lining to protect the neoprene so that it doesn't rip or tear and has a longer shelf life, okay? Which is particularly important on the inside of the suit, obviously because that's where it's going to be coming into contact with your body, okay? So that's a single-lined neoprene. And then with a surfing wetsuit or a multi-purpose wetsuit, you'll usually see a double-lined neoprene, okay? Which is basically lycra jersey on the outside, and then a lycra jersey on the inside as well, okay? And the reason that they do this is for durability and to give it a bit more protection, okay? Because if you're imagining you're lying on a surfboard, it's much more necessary to line the outside of the suit as well, because it's coming into contact with things, okay? And there is some single-line neoprene on here as well, and I'll explain the reason they do that in a little minute or two. So just to give you a bit of an insight, how they actually make neoprene, they make the block of rubber which is infused with gas, and when it comes out of the oven, essentially it has a crust on it, and the crust is on the top and the bottom, and it's that crust that they use for this single-line neoprene, okay? They tend to use that crust in swimming wetsuits or on those sort of panels on the chest and the back of the wetsuit, because it has very specific properties which lend itself well to things like wind protection. And for swimming wetsuits, those advantages of that crust, okay, or that sort of smooth material, is that it's very non-absorbent, okay? So if you imagine you only have to line one side of this piece of neoprene, the crust of the block, then it's going to be taking on a lot less water, being absorbed into that lycra jersey. Another benefit of that smooth material is that it does go through the water nice and easily, so it glides through the water better, okay? So there's less of a kinetic energy, less of a friction between the water and the wetsuit itself, which is particularly good for swimming. So you stay lighter and you glide through the water better with this sort of smooth material, okay? Which is why they typically use it in mostly all swimming wetsuits, okay? So the downside of that crust or of that sort of single-line neoprene is very prone to ripping and tearing, okay? Because it's not protected with the jersey, and it might be more robust than, say, the inside section of a block of neoprene, but it is much more likely to rip and tear, mostly through people's fingernails when they're pulling it on and off, especially in triathlons when you've got to get in and out of the wetsuit quickly. They do have a tendency to rip, so they're very, very fragile. And also, as you can imagine, when they're making a block of neoprene, because there's only two parts of that whole block which have that smooth material within them, then it's going to make it more of a premium neoprene and in turn much more expensive, which is why when you look at swimming wetsuits and triathlon wetsuits, that kind of thing, they tend to be very, very pricey, okay? So that's essentially the difference between the single-line neoprene and the double-line neoprene, and you can give you an insight as to why they use, say, double-lined in most multi-purpose wetsuits, because it is much more durable. But it's not the only advantage of that particular material. The reason they use it on the sort of chest and the kidneys of some surfing wetsuits as well is because it's very good at keeping a wind off the wetsuit as well. Having that sort of like crust basically stops any wind penetration into the suit. It seems to be better at keeping wind out. So they sometimes will add that around the chest and around the sort of core of the wetsuit to keep your torso and your internal organs as warm as possible, okay? So that is the reason sometimes, even within the multi-purpose wetsuits, you do get that single line neoprene as well. If you're wondering whether you could say grab, you're mainly swimming, but you might want to occasionally surf in your swimming wetsuit, your really expensive triathlon wetsuit, then we would definitely say no, don't do that, because the suit will tear when you jump on your bodyboard or jump on your surfboard or attach a harness. When you're moving against it, it's likely to tear. Obviously, if you wanted to use a suit for a bit of surfing, a bit of bodyboarding or kite surfing, everything, we say it would be much more sensible to go for a multi-purpose wetsuit, okay? Because even though they're not sort of swim specific, so you will take on a bit more water, it won't glide through the water as well. It will still perform as a swimming wetsuit. There's nothing to stop it happening. You're not going to sink, but it won't rip or tear when you do use it for surfing or whatever. If you're thinking about a suit for both, always go with the double-lined suit, the multi-purpose wetsuit. Okay. Down into some more specifics about swimming wetsuit and some of the other differences. It's going to be down to the paneling of the wetsuit is a big difference. Okay, so typically with the surfing wetsuit, you'll have a thicker neoprene or a 5mm neoprene on the lower body, the whole lower body, and then it will thin out around the shoulders where you need a bit more flexibility, and perhaps around the ankles where you can get your feet through. Okay, and that's the general structure of a surfing wetsuit. Okay. Bit different with a swimming wetsuit because they're taking into lots of different factors, and that is down to your position or your body shape in the water and your swimming form. Okay, so a swim-specific wetsuit, then instead of using the neoprene more for warmth, they'll be using that thicker neoprene for buoyancy. Okay, so they'll panel the wetsuit differently, and they'll also use it for things like compression and lift. Okay, so what you'll typically find in a swimming wetsuit, the paneling will be different. It'll still be nice and flexible around the shoulders. So you'll always have more flexible neoprene on the shoulders to give you obviously movement when you need it. But then the thicker neoprene might be situated more around the bum, depending on who the suit is marketed for, and that's to give you lift in the heavier parts of your body. And really, it's all about maintaining good form, nice straight form in the water. And so they're thinking about your posture when you're swimming. Okay, so that is typically the difference. The actual paneling of the suit, the seam placement and that kind of thing will vary slightly with a swimming wetsuit as well. Okay, the swimming wetsuit tends to be all about lightness and flexibility, and anywhere time there is any thicker neoprene, it might not be so much about warmth, it will be again about giving you buoyancy in the right places. Whereas the surfing or multi-purpose wetsuit is kind of flexibility in the upper body, but then warmth, okay, because you're using this in cold water and you're sat still for quite some time. It's about sort of maintaining warmth. And so in a multi-purpose wetsuit, a double-lined wetsuit, you'll also find the introduction of lots of other technologies such as thermal lining, liquid taping, air-insulated neoprene, okay. Very rare you'll get any of that in a sort of swimming wetsuit if it adds weight to the suit, okay, because if it adds weight, it's detrimental to obviously a flexibility and everything that you need in a swimming wetsuit. That's purely just a quick little video to give you a bit of an insight. Hopefully it's helped, but those primarily are the differences between the two. It's the type of neoprene and the paneling of that neoprene within the suit. You may well be able to use a multi-purpose wetsuit for swimming, although it's not completely ideal, but you can't really go the other way. You can, but you can expect lots of rips and tears in your wetsuit. But hopefully that's helped you. Any more questions, post a comment below and we'll get back to you as soon as we can.